She saved 14 wolves from starving to death. The Omega had no idea one was the Alpha King. The village behind her had long since grown quiet, and the last of the smoke from chimneys disappeared into the gray sky. She hugged her shawl tighter around her shoulders, her breath forming little clouds in the cold air. Ilara had never been someone who feared the forest. Even as a child, she had wandered among its towering pines and shadowed hollows, feeling the pulse of life beneath the frozen ground. Tonight, however, the forest felt different. It was heavy with silence, as if every living thing was holding its breath. And that silence, she would soon discover, carried a sound she could not ignore, a faint, desperate whimpering. She followed the sound, her footsteps careful and deliberate. The whimpering grew louder, mingled with coughs and soft groans, until she came to a clearing near a frozen river. There, huddled together under a thin layer of snow, were 14 wolves. Their fur was matted and dull, their ribs showing through thin coats, and their eyes were wide with hunger and fear. Ilara's heart twisted painfully. She had seen animals suffer before, but never like this. These creatures were on the edge of life and death, and no human in her village would dare to help them. Fear and superstition had kept the villagers away for years, but Ilara could not turn back. She dropped to her knees, shaking the snow from her cloak. "SHH, it's okay," she whispered. Her voice was soft, barely more than a breath. "I'm here to help, you're safe now." The wolves flinched, their ears flattening against their heads. One of them, a large male with fur darker than the midnight sky, rose slightly, his eyes fixed on her. There was something in his gaze that made her pause. It was not just hunger or fear. There was intelligence there, a careful watchfulness, and a kind of pride. Ilara swallowed and reached into her satchel. She had brought bread, dried meat, and some herbs. She laid them gently on the snow and stepped back. Slowly, hesitantly, the wolves approached. One by one, they began to eat, their growls soft, almost mournful. The dark wolf, however, remained at the edge, watching her with piercing amber eyes. Hours passed like this. The forest around them deepened into night, the moon rising pale and cold in the sky. Ilara fed the wolves, murmuring to them, and even when she felt her hands growing numb, she did not leave. She felt a strange connection to the dark wolf, who now crouched a little closer, his gaze never leaving her face. At last, the pack settled around her. Their breathing slowed, and the soft warmth of their bodies pressed against the snow, a fragile comfort against the chill. Ilara knelt in the center of the circle, exhausted but filled with a strange sense of peace. She noticed then the small, almost imperceptible markings on the dark wolf's fur, scars, faded and silvered with age. Something about him felt ancient, not just older than the others, but older than anything she had known. He was more than a wolf. And though she could not explain why, a shiver ran down her spine. "Who are you?" she whispered, as if speaking might bridge the distance between them. The wolf tilted his head, eyes narrowing, and let out a low, soft howl. It was not a call to the other wolves. It was something deeper, almost a song. And in that sound, Ilara felt a strange stirring in her chest, a mix of fear and awe, as if the forest itself was listening. Night fell fully then, and the snow began to drift in thin, quiet flurries. Ilara knew she could not leave the wolves here. They would not survive the night on their own. She gathered her courage and spoke softly, "Come with me. I have a place you can stay, a warm place with food." The wolves hesitated. The smaller ones stepped forward first, their bellies full enough to give them courage. The dark wolf lingered at the edge, watching, measuring. Finally, with a graceful, almost regal movement, he rose and followed, silent as shadow. The journey to her cabin was slow. The forest seemed endless, dark trees stretching like silent sentinels on either side. Snow covered the ground in thick layers, making each step a struggle. But the wolves moved with careful precision, their paws making little sound. The dark wolf led, glancing back only occasionally, as if ensuring she was still with them. When they arrived at the small cabin hidden in a grove, Alara opened the door and lit a fire. The wolves entered cautiously, sniffing the air, their eyes bright with curiosity and hunger. The dark wolf lingered in the doorway, body tense, until she knelt and extended her hand. "Come," she said. "It's safe." He stepped inside, his movements fluid, almost ceremonial, and curled near the fire. The warmth made him shift slightly, his fur catching the light like dark velvet. Alara felt a strange fascination, the same pull she had felt in the forest. There was a strength in him that no human could match, and yet there was also vulnerability. She spent the night tending to them, feeding and cleaning the wolves, speaking softly to them, though the dark wolf rarely responded. He merely watched her, eyes gleaming with a silent intensity. And in those eyes she felt a story she could not yet understand, a story of loss, power, and something far older than the woods around them. Morning came with the pale light of winter, and the wolves were calmer, their breathing steady. Alara stepped outside, the snow crunching beneath her boots, and looked at the forest. Somewhere out there, beyond the trees, something watched. She could feel it, a presence that was not human, yet not entirely wolf. The dark wolf emerged from the cabin, standing at the edge of the grove. He lifted his head and howled, a sound that was at once mournful and commanding. The other wolves answered, their voices echoing through the forest. Alara shivered, not from cold but from the depth of emotion in that cry, a longing that was almost tangible. She knelt in the snow, tears forming despite herself. "I don't know who you are," she whispered, "but I promise I will help you." For a moment the wolf stared at her, unblinking. And then, almost imperceptibly, he lowered his head, brushing the tip of his nose against her hand. The connection was brief, but it was enough. Enough to make her heart race and her mind whirl with questions she could not yet answer. The forest seemed to breathe around them, the wind softening, the snow falling in gentle spirals. And for the first time, Alara felt that perhaps the world was larger, stranger, and more magical than she had ever imagined. But as she watched the dark wolf retreat to the shadows of the cabin, a thought pricked at the edge of her mind, a quiet, persistent fear. This wolf was no ordinary creature. There was power in him and secrets. Secrets that could change everything she knew about the forest, her village, and perhaps even herself. And somewhere deep in the woods, unseen, another pair of eyes watched the cabin, calculating and patient. Eyes that recognized the dark wolf and knew exactly what had been lost and what might be regained. Alara did not see them, but she felt their presence. A shiver ran through her, mingled with anticipation. The story was only beginning, and already it promised to be more than she had ever imagined. That night, as she sat beside the fire, the wolves resting around her, she dreamed of eyes like amber flames, of shadows moving with intent, and of a future she could not yet see, but one that would demand courage, compassion, and a heart willing to trust in the impossible. And somewhere in the darkness, the dark wolf dreamed too, of humans, of kings, of curses, and of the girl who had dared to save 14 wolves from starving to death. The sun rose weakly over the snow-covered forest, painting the sky in pale shades of gray and gold. Alara awoke to the soft rustling of paws on the wooden floor of her cabin. She rubbed her eyes and looked around. The wolves were moving quietly, stretching, sniffing the air, and circling each other as if they were waking from a long, troubled sleep. The dark wolf, the one she had come to call Shadow, stood slightly apart, his head low, eyes fixed on her. He did not approach, did not make a sound, but there was a strange calm in his presence. Alara had learned in the small time they had spent together that he watched everything, always aware, always careful. She felt drawn to him, as though some invisible thread linked them together. "Good morning," she whispered, her voice soft against the quiet. "I've got more food for you today." She gathered the leftovers from the night before, mixed them with fresh bread and dried meat, and laid it on the cabin floor. The smaller wolves moved quickly, eating with quiet relief, while Shadow lingered at the edge. His amber eyes followed her every move, cautious, yet intensely curious. Alara knelt on the floor and watched him, noticing the slight tension in his muscles, the way his ears flicked at every sound outside the cabin. She reached out a hand, palm up, and whispered again, "It's okay. I won't hurt you." For a long moment he did nothing. Then slowly he stepped forward, his paws silent on the wooden planks, and lowered his head. His nose brushed against her hand, gentle, testing, trusting. Alara's heart leapt, and she felt a strange warmth spread through her chest, a mix of relief, fear, and fascination. The wolves finished eating, and Alara decided it was time to take them outside. The forest was cold, but it was safe enough during the day, and she wanted them to stretch their legs. The pack followed her quietly, Shadow at the lead, moving like a shadow among the trees. As they walked through the snow, Alara spoke softly to them, telling stories about the forest, about the animals who lived there, and about the village she had grown up in. The smaller wolves listened with alert ears, but Shadow seemed to listen to every word she said, as if understanding more than an ordinary wolf could. At one point, he stopped near a frozen stream and looked back at her. There was an intensity in his gaze, a kind of silent question. Alara knelt beside the ice and spoke, "I know you are not like the others, I can feel it. You are something more." He tilted his head, studying her, and then raised his nose to the wind. A howl escaped his throat, long and haunting. The sound was not just a wolf's call, it carried a depth, a sadness, and a command that made the forest itself seem to listen. The smaller wolves answered, their voices softer, almost obedient. Alara shivered. The howl was beautiful and frightening at the same time. She did not know what it meant, but she felt the truth in it. This wolf was not ordinary. Something in him was ancient, strong, and wise beyond measure. Days passed like this. Alara cared for the wolves, feeding them, keeping them warm, and gradually gaining their trust. Shadow began to come closer each day, his movements slower, more relaxed. He would lie near her while she worked, occasionally brushing against her hand, and she felt a connection growing between them that went beyond words. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the forest, painting the sky in fiery reds and oranges, a shadow fell across the cabin. Alara looked up and froze. A man stood there, tall and sharp-featured, with eyes that seemed to measure everything. His cloak was heavy and dark, and his presence carried an authority she had never felt before. "Good evening," he said, his voice smooth and confident. "I am Prince Kalen. I've been searching for the lost Alpha King. It is said he roams these woods in wolf form. I believe you may have found him." Alara's heart skipped a beat. She glanced at Shadow. The wolf's ears flattened, his body stiffened, and a low growl rumbled in his throat. But the growl was cautious, not aggressive. He was assessing this human, trying to understand the danger. I don't know what you mean," Alara said, her voice trembling slightly. "They are just wolves. I saved them from starving, that's all." Prince Kalen's eyes narrowed, but there was no anger, only a calm intensity. "There is one among them different. I can feel it. The Alpha King, cursed to live as a wolf until his kingdom is restored. That wolf is more than an animal, and you have been close to him. You must be careful." Alara's mind raced. She glanced at Shadow again. He was standing still, watching, and she noticed something in his eyes, recognition and perhaps fear. Could it be true? Could this wolf really be a king? And if he was, what did that mean for her? "I don't understand," she whispered. He's just a wolf to me. I've been helping all of them." Kalen's gaze softened slightly, though his intensity never left him. "Sometimes the truth is hidden in plain sight. You have done a brave thing, but there are forces at work you cannot yet see. That wolf, he is tied to the fate of the kingdom, and you may hold a part of that fate in your hands as well." Alara felt a shiver run down her spine. She did not know whether to be afraid or curious. Shadow lifted his head, letting out a low growl, almost a warning, and Kalen took a step back. "You have done well to gain his trust," Kalen said. "But know this, others will come for him." Some wish to claim him, some to destroy him. You must be careful, and if you value him, you must be ready to protect him, even from yourself." Kalen turned and vanished into the forest, leaving Alara with a storm of thoughts and a heart pounding in her chest. She looked at Shadow. The wolf stepped closer, brushing her hand gently, as if reassuring her that he trusted her, that he needed her. Days turned into weeks, and the bond between Alara and Shadow deepened. She learned to understand his moods, his subtle signals, and his quiet commands to the other wolves. He was no ordinary wolf. He led the pack with silent authority, and yet he allowed her presence, trusted her care, and in moments of calm even sought her companionship. One night under a sky full of stars, Alara sat beside the fire outside the cabin, watching the wolves sleep. Shadow lay close to her, his head resting near her knees. She spoke softly, telling him stories about the village, about her dreams, and about the world beyond the forest. He listened, tilting his head, eyes glowing softly in the firelight. "You are different," she whispered. "Not just a wolf, not just a leader. You are something more. I wish I could understand you." He lifted his nose, brushing it gently against her hand, and then howled, a long, low sound that seemed to echo across the forest. It was mournful, commanding, and filled with longing. Alara felt tears prick her eyes. That howl was not just for the pack. It was for something lost, something broken, something waiting to be found. The forest seemed to respond. The wind softened, the snow falling in gentle spirals, and the smaller wolves stirred, looking toward Shadow as if they understood something she did not. Alara realized then that the bond she shared with Shadow was growing stronger, deeper, more than she had ever imagined. She was no longer just a rescuer. She was a part of his life now, and he a part of hers. But with that bond came responsibility, and a creeping fear that their connection might bring danger she could not yet see. One evening, as she returned from gathering herbs near the edge of the forest, Alara found the cabin surrounded by strange footprints. They were too large for humans, too deliberate for ordinary animals. Shadow growled low in his throat, stepping in front of her, his body tense, ears alert. Alara's heart pounded. She knew, without fully understanding how, that someone or something had come looking for the Alpha King, and they had found the wolves. The forest grew silent again, the snow falling heavier, as if holding its breath. Shadow stared into the shadows beyond the trees, his amber eyes glowing. Alara felt the pull of destiny pressing against her, heavy and inevitable. She knelt beside him, hand on his fur. "I won't let anything happen to you," she whispered. "Not to you, not to the pack. I promise." Shadow lifted his head, letting out a low, steady howl that echoed across the forest, a sound of warning, of power, of connection. And in that moment, Alara knew that their lives had changed forever. The bond had begun. The adventure, the danger, and the hidden truths were only starting to reveal themselves. And somewhere in the distance, unseen, eyes watched, waiting, calculating. The forest was no longer just a place of survival. It had become a stage for destiny, power, and a story that would reach beyond the trees, beyond the mountains, and into the heart of a kingdom lost to Shadow. Alara tightened her cloak and looked down at Shadow. His gaze met hers, intense, unflinching, full of something she could not name. And she knew with every beat of her heart that she could never walk away. Not now, not ever. And the Wolf King, protector, enigma, seemed to know it too. The forest was quiet, almost unnaturally so, as Alara guided the wolves through the deeper snow. Their paws pressed into the white powder, leaving tracks that would soon be covered by the falling flakes. Shadow moved ahead of the pack, alert, ears twitching at every rustle, nose raised to the wind. There was something in the air tonight, something heavy, like the forest itself was holding its breath. Alara's mind wandered as she walked. She thought of the Prince Kalen and his warning. The words he had spoken echoed in her mind. You must be ready to protect him, even from yourself. She still did not fully understand what he meant. How could she, a simple healer from a small village, protect a wolf who, she now suspected, was no ordinary wolf, from the world and from dangers she could not see. The wolves moved silently into a clearing surrounded by tall pines. Snow fell in thick flakes, covering the ground and creating a muted silence. Shadow stopped in the center and lifted his head, his amber eyes scanning the horizon. Alara felt a strange tension tighten in her chest. There was an intelligence in him, a knowing look that made her pause. She knelt in the snow and whispered, "What are you trying to tell me?" For a long moment he said nothing. Then, as the moon rose behind the clouds, Shadow shifted in an almost human-like motion, lowering his body slightly and letting out a long, mournful howl. The sound echoed through the trees, carrying an unmistakable weight of sorrow and authority. The smaller wolves answered, their voices soft and reverent. Alara's heart pounded. Something deep within her stirred, an understanding she could not explain. She reached out her hand, letting it hover just above Shadow's fur. He lifted his head and met her gaze directly, his eyes glowing with a strange intensity. And then, in the quietest, most surreal moment, he did something she had never imagined. His body shimmered under the moonlight, and for the briefest instant she glimpsed the figure of a man within the wolf's form. Her breath caught. She stumbled back slightly, snow slipping beneath her feet. You're not just a wolf," she whispered, voice trembling. Shadow's form shifted again, settling back into the familiar wolf, but his eyes, amber flames in the night, held a truth she could no longer deny. He was more. He was something more. He was the Alpha King. The revelation struck her in waves, leaving her both terrified and mesmerized. She looked at the wolf, the king, and for the first time saw not only a creature of strength and mystery, but also a soul that had carried burdens far heavier than any she had ever known. Before she could speak, a shadow fell across the clearing. Alara turned, heart pounding, to see Prince Kalen stepping from the trees, his cloak brushing the snow. He carried himself with calm authority, yet there was a tension in his eyes, a mixture of caution and urgency. "You see now," Kalen said softly, his voice carrying through the silence. "He is no ordinary wolf. The Alpha King has been hidden for centuries, cursed to walk in this form until the kingdom is ready to rise again." Alara's mind raced. But why him? Why like this? Kalen sighed. Because only the one who understands the true nature of strength and compassion can break the curse. And it seems you may be part of that. He trusts you. He needs you. Shadow growled softly, low in his throat, and moved closer to Alara as if to reassure her, or perhaps to remind her that he was still in control, still the leader, still the king. She reached out to him, brushing her hand along his fur. A shiver ran through her, not from the cold but from the weight of everything unfolding. Kalen stepped forward, voice lowering. "There are those who would claim him for their own purposes, power, control, revenge. He is not safe here. You must help him, Alara. Help him return, or the kingdom, the forest, even the pack could be lost." Alara swallowed hard, her mind spinning. I don't know if I can do this," she admitted. "I only wanted to help him, to save them from starving. I never imagined," she trailed off, unable to finish. "You can," Kalen said firmly, though not unkindly. "And you must. Sometimes the smallest act of courage can change the fate of many. Right now you are that courage." Shadow lifted his head, amber eyes meeting hers. She felt his silent command, his quiet plea. And in that moment, something deep within her hardened. She would not run. She would not turn away. She would protect him, even if she did not fully understand what that protection would demand. The night deepened, and the wind carried a cold promise of danger. Footsteps echoed through the forest, soft, deliberate, and calculated. Alara froze, hand tightening on Shadow's fur. The smaller wolves tensed, their ears flattening, eyes wide. Shadow's growl deepened, resonating through the clearing like a drumbeat. From the darkness emerged a group of figures cloaked in black, moving with precision and purpose. Alara's heart raced. She did not recognize them, but she could sense their intent. They had come for Shadow. Kalen stepped forward, voice steady. These are not mere hunters. They know what they seek, and if they take him, the kingdom may fall further into shadow. Alara swallowed her fear, stepping closer to Shadow. I won't let them take you, she whispered. Her voice carried more strength than she had expected, and she felt it resonate with the wolf at her side. The figures paused, sensing the bond between them. Shadow's growl grew louder, a deep rumble that seemed to shake the very air. The leader of the cloaked group stepped forward, hood falling back to reveal a sharp face and eyes like ice. You've hidden him long enough, the stranger said, voice cold. But the Alpha King belongs to those who understand power, not to a girl playing savior. Alara's chest tightened. She could feel the danger pressing closer, could feel the tension crackling between the forest and the wolves. Shadow moved closer, body low, ears pinned, muscles coiled like springs. He was ready, and yet he trusted her. He needed her courage to match his strength. I am not just a girl, Alara said firmly, her voice steady despite the fear that knotted her stomach. And he is not yours, he is. He is more than any of you understand, and I will not let you take him. A tense silence followed, broken only by the wind through the trees and the soft snow falling around them. Shadow lifted his head, letting out a long, haunting howl, a sound that carried both warning and command. The smaller wolves answered in kind, forming a living wall of loyalty and strength around him. The cloaked figures hesitated, as if sensing the truth in that howl. Then, with a final glance at each other, they retreated into the forest, leaving only snow and silence in their wake. Alara sank to her knees, breath coming in ragged gasps. Shadow nudged her gently, pressing his warm body against her side. She could feel the weight of the bond between them, the unspoken understanding that they were now partners in something far greater than either had imagined. Kalen stepped closer, his expression softer now. You have done well, he said, but this is only the beginning. Others will come and they will not leave so easily. You must prepare and you must trust him. Alara nodded, looking down at Shadow. His amber eyes met hers, filled with a depth of emotion she could not name. There was trust, yes, but also longing and something else, something fragile waiting to be understood. The forest seemed to exhale around them, the snow falling gently, the wind whispering through the trees. And for the first time, Alara understood something about courage and connection. It was not the absence of fear, but the willingness to face it, to stand beside those we love, and to protect them even when the world seemed ready to destroy what we held most dear. That night, as she tended to the wolves and watched Shadow settle near the fire, Alara felt the weight of the journey ahead. There would be dangers, betrayals, and choices that tested her heart and spirit. But she also knew that the bond she shared with Shadow, fragile as it was, had the power to withstand any trial. And somewhere in the forest, hidden in shadow, eyes watched, waiting and plotting. The Alpha King's secret was no longer hidden, and the forces seeking him would not rest. Alara felt a shiver run down her spine, not from the cold, but from the knowledge that the challenges ahead would demand everything she had and more. But she was ready. Because she had seen him, truly seen him, not as a wolf, not as a king, but as a being worth fighting for. And she would fight. The wind howled through the forest, carrying snow in thick, swirling currents. Alara wrapped her shawl tightly around her shoulders, her boots sinking into the heavy drifts as she followed Shadow and the pack deeper into the trees. Danger had been growing since Kalen's warning, and now it was no longer hidden. Somewhere in the distance, she could hear faint, deliberate movements, footsteps that did not belong to the wolves, voices carried away by the wind. Shadow led the way, every muscle in his body taut and alert. His amber eyes scanned the horizon, glowing in the dim light like molten gold. The smaller wolves stayed close behind, following his silent commands with unwavering loyalty. And Alara, heart pounding, kept pace with them, feeling the weight of responsibility pressing down on her like the snow-covered branches overhead. They reached a clearing, a natural amphitheater of frozen earth and snow-laden pines. Moonlight spilled across the ground, illuminating a circle of strange symbols etched into the ice. Alara recognized the markings from Kaelin's description, a ritual place where ancient forces could be called and where curses could be broken or strengthened. "You must be ready," Kaelin's voice echoed in her memory. "This is where his curse can be lifted, but only if he trusts you completely, only if you face what lies ahead together." Alara knelt in the snow beside Shadow, brushing the frost from his fur. "We're ready," she whispered. "I'm with you, always." The wolf looked at her, amber eyes reflecting the moonlight, and for a heartbeat she felt the faint shimmer of his true form, human, tall, regal, and burdened by centuries of power. Then, as if acknowledging her courage, he nudged her hand with his nose, grounding her in the moment. From the tree line, a figure emerged, cloaked in black, carrying a staff that glinted with ice and shadows. The intruder's eyes were sharp, calculating, and filled with malice. "So the girl and the wolf stand together," the figure said, voice like breaking ice. "You cannot hope to control him, and you cannot hope to stop what is coming. The curse will remain, and his kingdom will fall." Alara stood, facing the stranger with trembling hands but steady eyes. "I don't care what you think," she said. "He is not yours. He is not a weapon, and he is not cursed to be alone. He is everything he chooses to be, and we will face whatever comes together." The intruder laughed, a sound that echoed through the forest, making the snow-covered trees seem to shiver. "You are brave, little healer, but bravery alone will not protect him. Power, true power, demands sacrifice. Are you willing to give yours?" Alara swallowed hard, feeling the weight of the moment. She glanced at Shadow. The wolf stepped closer, shoulders squared, ears erect, eyes glowing with quiet fire. She saw not only strength but trust, the bond they had forged through days and nights of care, fear, and shared understanding. "I will," she said, voice steady. "I will give what I must, and I will protect him, no matter what." The intruder raised the staff, summoning a swirl of wind and shadow that lifted the snow in spirals. The pack growled, circling Shadow protectively, but he did not move aggressively. Instead, he sat tall, eyes fixed on Alara, waiting for her courage to guide the outcome. Alara took a deep breath, feeling her heartbeat sync with his. She stepped into the center of the ritual circle, letting her hands hover over the icy symbols. She spoke softly, calling on the courage and compassion that had guided her from the first night she rescued the wolves. "Strength is not power without heart," she whispered. "Love is not weakness, trust is not fear. Let the curse be lifted not by force but by what is true." For a moment the forest fell silent, even the wind seemed to pause. The intruder faltered, surprised by the power of her words. Then the ice around the ritual markings began to glow faintly, shimmering like the first light of dawn on fresh snow. Shadow's form began to change, subtly at first, then more clearly. His fur shimmered, his body elongated, and for the first time since she had met him, Alara saw him as he truly was, a man tall and strong with eyes like molten amber, carrying centuries of pain, wisdom, and unfulfilled duty. Alara gasped, You're human." He knelt slightly, not out of weakness but to meet her eye to eye. "I am," he said, voice deep and resonant. "But it is because of you that I can be this. Because you trusted me, because you cared for me, I can stand as I was meant to. I am no longer bound by the curse." Tears pricked Alara's eyes, and she reached out, placing her hands on his shoulders. The snow swirled around them like a gentle storm, the magic of the forest responding to their bond. The smaller wolves circled them, howling softly as if singing their approval, their loyalty unwavering. The intruder staggered, disbelief flashing in their eyes. "No, this cannot be. The curse, it cannot be broken like this." "You underestimated the bond of trust," Alara said softly. "You cannot break what is built on love and courage." Shadow, now fully human, stepped forward, his presence commanding yet gentle. "Leave," he said, voice rich with authority. "You have no power here." The intruder hesitated, then retreated, melting into the shadows of the forest. The danger was not gone entirely, but for now the immediate threat had passed. Alara exhaled, relief washing over her. She looked at him, king, wolf, protector, friend, and felt a warmth that went beyond the cold. "You're free," she whispered. He knelt beside her, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "And you," he said, "helped me find that freedom. Without you, I would still be lost in shadow, trapped in a form that was not mine. You saved more than the pack. You saved me." The wolves circled them, nuzzling his legs and resting their heads near her. The bond between human, king, and pack had grown stronger than the forest itself, a circle of trust, loyalty, and love. The snow began to melt slightly under the first rays of dawn. Light spilled across the clearing, illuminating the markings of the ritual and the footprints of their journey. Alara felt a sense of peace she had never known, a quiet joy tempered by the understanding that challenges would come again. But for now, the darkness had lifted and a new chapter was beginning. Kalen appeared from the forest edge, bowing slightly. "The kingdom may yet awaken," he said. "Thanks to your courage, the Alpha King stands once more. The road ahead will be long, but with him, and with you, there is hope." Alara smiled, glancing at Shadow. He met her gaze, eyes softening, and in that moment words were unnecessary. Their journey had begun, but their bond was unbreakable. Days turned into weeks. Shadow resumed his rightful place as king, guiding his pack and beginning to heal the lands that had suffered in his absence. Alara stayed by his side, tending to the wolves, learning the secrets of the forest, and understanding the depth of her own courage. The villagers who had once feared the forest began to see the wolves not as threats but as guardians. The kingdom, slowly and carefully, awakened from its shadowed slumber. And through it all, Alara and Shadow, king and healer, walked side by side, their bond a symbol of trust, courage, and transformation. One evening, standing on a hill overlooking the forest, Alara watched the wolves play among the trees, their laughter like howls filling the air. Shadow stood beside her, tall and regal, hand brushing hers. The wind carried the scent of pine and snow, a reminder that the world was vast, alive, and waiting. "You changed everything," she said softly. "No," he replied, amber eyes meeting hers. "You did. Your heart, your courage, that is what broke the curse, not strength or power. You taught me that being a king is not about ruling with fear. It is about trust, care, and love. You changed me." Alara felt warmth spread through her chest. "Then we are both changed," she said, smiling. Shadow nodded, and together they looked over the forest, knowing that while darkness might rise again, they would face it as one, bound not by duty alone, but by trust, courage, and the quiet magic of hearts that dared to care. And the wolves, 14 strong, ran beneath the moonlight, a living testament to survival, loyalty, and the power of a bond that could transcend forms, curses, and fear. The forest whispered around them, alive with the promise of a future reborn. And in that silence between human, king, and pack, the world felt right again.